What's up, guys? I'm Chad Barnes, and welcome to the channel. Here, it's all about real car talk, from simple fixes to smart driving tips and keeping your ride in top shape. If that sounds good to you, go ahead and give the video a thumbs up. Hit that subscribe button and make sure you watch all the way through. There's a lot of good stuff coming. Let's get
Running
to it.
gear. Braking system. The fact that brakes in Toyota cars are weak is not a secret. Here and Mark II is not distinguished by excessive performance of braking mechanisms. Discs 275mm for a car with 160 horsepower engine seem weak. Even on budget Opel Vectra B of the end of 90th with a Motor 2 zero rotors were 286mm. But there is a nuance. Typical Mark II with 2-litre motor weighs 1,375 kilograms in a base, and Opel, on 150 kilograms more, though it is weaker, only 136 forces. However, in practice, it is not recommended to drive too actively on any of these cars. It is extremely unpleasant that on cars with a Motor 1 JZ FSE 2.5, 200 horsepower the brakes will be exactly the same, and only with supercharged 2.51 JZ GTE 280 horsepower are entitled as much as 296mm rotors. Taking into account the dynamic style of operation, the resource of brake mechanisms simply cannot be too great. And they do not take care of them, because the choice of contract, or in human language, simply used discs and calipers is huge. And their price is very low. European owners better not to read now. On Mark II you can buy even used brake pads with real imperial quality, and without mileage in Russia. And there is a demand. Brake pipes are also often replaced with used ones, but such perfectionism is gradually coming to naught. Still, non-original copper tubes are cheaper and more reliable, and original ones serve for 10 years before the first fistulas appear. Otherwise, the brakes are excellent, everything is made intelligently, calipers are simple, even on the top IRV in front, practical. 2-piston with a floating bracket. With minimal maintenance they last forever, but usually they are not serviced, as well as the whole car, because replacement with freshly imported used ones is cheaper than any meaningful work. In this respect, the car's brakes and suspension are a good marker of the owner's approach to maintenance. Typical Far Eastern style, where any work with the head and hands is dismissed as too strenuous, as it's cheaper to stick something from an auction, eventually turns the Mark into a Frankenstein. A typical car from 2021 looks like this. The ABS sensors are from a Corolla, the rims are from a vintage-bodied Crown, but the ball joints are new, as the used ones from 110s. Are trashed by owners of 90s and 100s as upgrades. From serious minuses it is possible to name a crooked ABS with frankly inanimate sensors and weak wiring. For the majority of owners it is unpleasant, but not fatal. Problems begin at owners of rare variants, for example all-wheel drive station wagons blit. Since Toyota puts the same brake rotors almost everywhere, but hubs and sensors are different everywhere. And the price of the new original can surprise even those accustomed to not cheap consumables of the European premium, for the sensor can ask both 150 and 250 euros. It is good that at least rotten ABS rings are on sale for 270 rubles. Detail original price of non-original 2 brakes front brake pads 4637 Bosch 1056 TRW 1912 brake pads. Rear 3663 Bosch 1109 TRW 2228 brake disc front 275 by 25mm 7661 Bosch 2252 Zekit 2100 brake disc rear 291 by 10mm 5926 and IBK 3288. Zekit 190 suspension. The Mark II suspension is not bad, firm and comfortable. It is a pity that the front strut and rear stabilizer are only for top versions with supercharged engines. With frankly weak engine shield and subframe, in combination with not the best geometry of chassis, these two elements thoroughly influence the general feeling of the car. Many Marks have heavily modified suspensions for two reasons. Someone wants more sport and puts tuning kits. There are a lot of new and used ones. 4 Marks make levers, bolts, spacers, and similar elements even in our country, and the imported assortment is indescribable. Any element of front or rear suspension is available in the tuning version, from spring to ball. The second reason for modifications is more banal, and it is the already mentioned desire to cram into the car second-hand cheaper, and not to repair the old. So do not be surprised if you suddenly see obviously not standard subframes, put through extended bolts and spacers, with re-welding of fastening places. You should run away from such a car. They could have remodeled even more. At the same time, there are consumables for the suspension, and they are relatively inexpensive. The only pity is that everything sours terribly even in regions where cars in general do not rot. It is not at all a fact that rear balls, they are floating silent blocks, will be replaced quickly and easily. Most likely, you will need a bolt cutter, a gas torch, a sledgehammer, and a pneumatic hammer. Bolts are sawed almost always, and levers often get it. That's why you often change the hub at the back instead of replacing the silent block and bearing or just the whole suspension on the subframe together with the rear gearbox. The kit can be found for a ridiculous 50 to 120 euros. You expect something about resource? It is almost impossible to determine it. There are no dealer cars, average mileage is 300 plus, everything is repaired with used parts. So regular complaints about the need to replace hubs, silent blocks in the rear suspension and ball joints in the front can simply be a consequence of postponed to the last repairs, successful quiet operation of the suspension even in a killed state and the use of bearings that have been in storage in improper conditions. The main thing is to make sure there is no coal hose when buying, and it will be inexpensive to restore to stock condition. Detail original price of non-original 2 suspension front lower straight arm 9 612 sat 2 616 s hemo 5 532. Upper arm 13 937 NTY 2008 Sidem 8 785 ball bearing 7016 CTR 1 733 Akataka 1 161 front hub, bearing 2 542 Phoenix 1 103 SKF 2050 rear. Longitudinal arm 5 626 not available front shock absorber 6 138 SAT 2 292 KYB 2 722 steering it sometimes leaks, sometimes knocks. But with the average price of the rack less than 3,000 rubles and pumps given for change, it is not terrible. Except that the rack on Turbo JZ-X110 with pressure regulator costs some appreciable money, but from Crown JZS-171 they are 3 times cheaper and fully compatible. The serious negatives are mainly due to 2 things. Over time the rail starts to bite as the housing wears out. That said, it does not leak or knock. And used ones often leak at the oil seals immediately, as they were stored without oil. Transmission. General problems: the total life of drive shafts and ball joints in any case is high, and the cost of replacement is small. Used from Japan are usually very inexpensive, 80 euros for the cardan, 40 euros for the drive, quite typical prices. Of course, immediately and now will be more expensive, but not so much to sound the alarm. And everything is generally well repaired. The rear gearbox is quite strong, and oil leakage due to worn oil seals usually does not lead to immediate failure. The price of the part is again small. Many have a welded for winter or for drifting and a normal live one for summer rides. But self-locked with Torsen and with the usual LSD locking are also appreciated. There is also a choice of tuning ones. The price of such can be up to 1/3 of the price of a running car. So, welding is a choice of a typical JDM nut mark driver, and even in regions with snowy winter. Because with a conventional differential the car has no passability, and any self-lock is much more expensive. Manual boxes it is hardly possible to find Mark II on mechanics by chance. It is banal, because the R154 gearbox is a rarity and due to this rarity is very expensive. The price of the original used now more than 1,600 euros. The set from the 80th body is cheaper, but also not Copex. Boxes W58, W60 are also not cheap, as well as flywheels. It is often practiced to install old GetRag 260-265 ZF320 GS6-45DZ from BMW with a re-welded bell housing, because even such troubles are cheaper than searching for the original gearbox on JZ, and besides, European boxes are almost all stronger. MKP was put only on JZX110 AEMVZ with 1 JZ GTA up to 2004. Such a car itself is a rarity indescribable, usually already having little to do with the factory equipment. Automatic transmissions: the typical Mark II is equipped with the good old Aisin AW03-72 4-speed, aka Aisin A44DL. This is truly a legendary box that stands up to anything and a little bit more. If the oil is changed at least once every 60 to 80 k, and the motor is non-turbocharged, the automatic will survive 500,000+ miles. Earlier, except for the GDT lock will run out, revolution sensor will fail or solenoid will malfunction. With the average price of a contract box in €50, especially do not want to bother with repairs. Although for the last few years the number of quality used boxes is decreasing, and people start to repair them little by little. Rare cars with 1JZ GTE and tuning ones are equipped with even stronger automatic transmission as an A343A. It is AW30-70LE. Why sturdier? Because it withstands tuned motors 1JZ GTE without special problems during several 100,000 kilometers of run. And with the stock ones it goes the same 500 plus. Prices on used variants are higher than on AW03-72, but not critically. Four-wheel drive, the transfer case and front gearbox are strong and cheap enough to not be mentioned at all. Unless in the context of disabling front-wheel drive for drifting. The easiest way to do this is to disconnect one of the ABS sensors, although the smartest people have figured out that instead you can cut power to the AWD unit or the signal from the ABS to it. It is more reliable, and ABS is not superfluous in winter. And, as with other torque-on-demand systems, the main problems are related to failures of sensors of the same ABS and wiring. Motors. General problems under the hood of Mark II is spacious, and everything is located very reasonably. In terms of serviceability, this is a very good car. Quality of manufacturing of any elements is excellent, and resource of any aggregate is excellent by European standards. As usual, it is let down by the style of service, which I have already mentioned. As soon as something breaks, the element is not repaired, but they try to replace the whole with the cheapest from a dismantling. The main thing is that without mileage in Russia. As a result, the wiring, brains, sensors, and anything else can be kolhoz. Special attention in the case of inline sixes should be paid to the cooling system, because long cylinder heads and blocks from overheating easily leads. Otherwise, it is Toyota, and therefore, it is a maximally practical car. Not without nuances, of course. For example, all motors are not very fond of cold start and are very sensitive to errors of lambdas, temperature sensors, and DADU. To the peculiarities of control systems. Typical symptoms of the latter are increased consumption and poor traction. And even in this condition, the motors will go to the last until the last sensor power driver in the brains burns out and the last drive from the DPDZ falls off. Gasoline motors as a result of the swap on the Mark II could be anything. I'll tell you straight away that we are only looking at standard engines. All UZ variants, good old just 1GFE and old JZs are out of consideration. Only 1G beams, 1JZ FSE, 1JZ GTE, and 1JZ GEVVTI. The last one was put on all-wheel drive station wagon split. Toyota had the 1G engine series for a long time, and it was replaced by the JZ series. But the simplest version of the engine, atmospheric with conventional injection and volume of 2.0 liters, was modernized by installation of electronic throttle, separate ignition coils, plastic intake manifold with adjustable geometry and a new catalytic converter. At the same time, hydro compensators were removed, and the abbreviation beams was added to the name, which means nothing more or less than breakthrough engine with advanced mechanism system. In general, the unit is breakthrough and with advanced mechanisms. In this form, the motor remained the base engine with 160 horsepower for Mark II and even Lexus IS of the first generation. Basically, it is remembered an unsuccessful air filter, bending of valves at breakage of timing, oil buildup, adjustment of valves and weak oil pump. The motor is neither fish nor flesh in terms of resource. On the one hand, its piston group is strong enough. There are examples of motors with very high mileage. But the majority of units in our operation after 100,000 there is a small oil consumption, about a litre or two from change. To change, which by 200 to 300,000 mileage turns into a burn in a litre or two per thousand. For a cast iron inline six from Toyota, the indicators are not very good. At first, the problem is coking oil rings and leaky valve seals, but over time the compression rings also get stale, the cylinder liners wear out, and the pistons wear out. If in time to Raskixosavat something killer like Demexid or BG109, you can postpone repairs for a long time. But while they do not bother so often, the price for these motors is not high. It is easier to change to, of course, a contract one. Without mileage in Russia, in fact, it was taken off a mark with a mileage of 360,000 at a dismantling in Podolsk. The 1G beams has a few annoying features. The valves need to be adjusted every 20,000 kilometers, and they are adjusted with push rods, which is not cheap, each costs €8. The gap does not go away in all, but usually one or two valves have to be readjusted. The VVTi valve regularly jams, and as a result, idle speeds go up or down, or traction can improve sharply at speeds of about 2000. Or fall at the top, brakes can become very tight. A new valve serves about 100,000 kilometers, but buy it only a select few, it costs as much as €60. Usually take used, they serve up to 30 to 50,000, but give them almost for nothing. Recently, valves have learned to clean, opening the opening with the replacement of sealing rings. And again flushing with ubiquitous Dimexide helps a little. Unsuccessful ECG system, in addition to being clogged, is also prone to freezing in winter with oil throwing out. Besides, it is realized very old-fashioned and floods the air filter with oil, which is sometimes very unpleasant. And the filter itself is not very good, there are great chances to put it crooked, and the engine will suck sand. A clogged VKG means leaks, wet plug wells, wet timing belt, wet wiring. It's easy to miss a leak through the oil pressure sensor. It requires regular inspection. The timing belt runs for a stable 100,000 if you use quality components. But the almost new, no mileage in Russia belt for Toyota is a harsh truth of life. People persistently put used consumables, although it is not the 90s for a long time. The old belt tears unpredictably, and the valves on this motor bend, usually 8 to 10 at a time. And the valves themselves are unsuccessful, they cannot be straightened, they crack on the edge if there is soot. And if it bends at revolutions, the plate may fall off and penetrate the piston. And there and to the friendship fist is not far away. Individual coils are quite strong, but do not like overheating, oil, and old plugs. They are not often bought new, still €60. And when choosing either a used one for €6 or a new non-original, one usually prefers a used one. Thankfully, replacement tips are on sale. And yes, plugs are also sold second-hand. A small nuance is connected with the oil pump. It is driven by the timing belt, and it is not bad in general. But oil addiction is often tried to ignore, pouring bad oil and increasing the intervals of full replacement. And this leads to early wear of the working group of the pump and wedges of the reducing valve. And cheap mineral oil on cold is strongly pressed through the weak pump packing directly on the timing belt. Of course, all troubles do not happen at once, but in general, the motor is noticeably more troublesome than all other 1G engines and even more modern ones. At the same time, it is not that it costs nothing at all. Prices start from €400 for a unit with a good auction estimate. And one more unpleasant nuance. The car with this motor in city mode has a fuel consumption steady 18 plus litres, often reaching 25 plus in winter. Taking into account that dynamics of 160 horsepower atmospheric on Mark II is rather moderate even taking into account its small mass. There are a lot of dissatisfied people. After all, much more torquey and powerful JZ eats the same or even less. Certainly, a part of this merit falls on the worn-out 4-stage automatic transmission with badly working locking of GDT, failures of power system, unregulated valves, old filters, but much depends on the engine. The second most popular motor is the 1JZ FSE, a version of the classic inline-6 with direct injection, as Toyota owners like to call it, D4. It's an interesting motor, not least due to the fact that the solutions of the usual 1JZFE VVTi were supplemented with a very simple direct injection system. It even retains the vacuum fuel pressure regulator on the fuel injector, and the pump itself was placed as a trampola on old motors, rising above the cylinder head cover in the center. There is more old school in the design than in beams. Cast aluminum intake with adjustable geometry has a damper drive, as if taken from ZL131. One-piece aluminum plug well cups. Fully disassembled EGR valve. Electromechanical throttle, which is as condensed as an ozone carburetor. Wire clamps on the intake manifold. The injectors are positioned open, like on old diesel engines, and secured the same way. And a timing belt made of HNBR, an oil-unafraid hydrogenated butadiene nitrile rubber in a sealed casing. The exhaust manifold is steel, with 2 equal-length branches. In general, the motor is beautiful from any side. It is a pity only, the price for a live Contractnik little by little approaches €1,200, and on very sensible copies long ago passed this boundary. However, the usual 1JZGE is much more expensive, and there are very few live ones. Little by little, motors from cars, rare even in Japan, like Toyota Progress and other oddities, which slightly differ from the most. Popular variants of Mark, Crown, etc. are starting to be selected. And due to the maintenance peculiarities of cars with JZ already mentioned more than once above, they will not be able to live without contractors. From the disadvantages of 1JZ FSE can be noted only hard sound of work, sensitivity to the octane number of gasoline, Zakhaksovkarov, exhaust valves and the intake in general every 50 to 80,000 kilometers. Well, and the resource of the piston group is somewhat less than that of the classic JZ because of the more obvious clogging of the upper compression ring and the constant presence of hard soot in the combustion chamber. In general, if you regularly perform water decoction and treatment from carbon deposits, then from the troubles will remain only inexpensive and very fragile injectors of direct injection, and the need to do once in 100,000 TO for the fuel injection system. Weak pump, wedging VVTI valve, weak visco clutch and falling out of the cylinder head fittings are the same as in 1JZGE in VVTI version. It's just that even great motors have their flaws and weaknesses. But this motor has a noticeably lower fuel consumption, while everything is in good working order, and even with an ancient 4-speed. In Moscow it can be reduced to 13 to 14 liters and usually does not rise above 16. Let me remind you that for the weaker 2.0 engine in the Mark II, this is practically the minimum consumption. And, of course, the Mark II has the classic 1JZGE and 1JZGTE. The first one is without everything at all, and in fact in the last paragraph of the description of the FSE version all the problems are described. With mileages up to 400 to 500 it has zero oil spoilage, and little to fear at all except overheating and bad oil. And the second is the turbo version of this unkillable motor. Powerful and with a good potential for tuning, which most owners greatly overestimate. Even in the stock it is much more sensitive to the quality of service and loads, but without special expenses allows to reach 350 to 400 horsepower. Further investments will be substantial, but still it is one of the best options, if you aim at 500 plus. But popularity has a downside. Live motors have long been in short supply, the price is off the charts even for variants in average condition, and put them with enviable regularity, once again resenting that the bench gave the load or gasoline was not the same or somehow try to justify the fact that crooked hands, careless assembly, and crooked firmware can kill even a very successful engine, if you tune it to the power of about 500 forces. But I guess if you're looking for a Mark with this motor, you hope you'll do well, and you're aware of the prices. Detail original price of non-original 2-motor radiator 5982 SAT 4476 JD 5241 timing belt 1G FE2 0. 3392 Dayco 3453 Mitsubishi 1973 1G FE tensioner 4240 NTN 4374 1G FE timing kit, not available blueprint 10942 1JZ FE, GTE toot. 5 belt 2651 Mitsubishi 2194 Sun 1436 pump 1 JZ 13389 Aizen 4756 NPW 4268 turbine 1 JZ GTE 136 318 SAT 21 919 PowerTech cartridge. 11642 to take or not to take. Kolhoz style of maintenance is the bane of any car, especially one that is 10 years old or more. For Mark II it is even more relevant because of partial, but not full, compatibility with other Toyota models and richness of supply of used parts. As a result, it turns out that in most cases a very good car will be unsuitable for normal operation and without chances to restore it to stock due to the depth of modifications. But if you are lucky to find a car, which has not been turned into a patchwork quilt of pieces collected from dumpsters, then take it without doubts. Consumer properties are more than worthy. The price of quality maintenance is low, and you can potentially drive it for another 10 years. In conclusion, the Toyota Mark II X110 stands out as a remarkable vehicle, especially when considering its unique combination of a chassis assembled from various pieces, a reliable automatic transmission, and engines that are often regarded as having no mileage in Russia. This model not only embodies durability and performance but also showcases the ingenuity of automotive engineering. For enthusiasts and collectors alike, the Mark II X110 represents a blend of nostalgia and practicality, making it a timeless choice in the world of cars. Thank you for watching, and we hope you gained valuable insights into this iconic vehicle.